What an incredible day to be together and to enjoy Chicago and Chicago Ideas Week. It's a great pleasure and privilege for me to spend part of it with you. And what I want to begin with is probably the single strangest scene I have ever seen on a football field anywhere in America. I've been around sports a lot in my life in a lot of different capacities, but the single strangest thing I saw happened on a football field in Baltimore. A football coach, a high school football coach, stood before his boys, his junior varsity and varsity football players who were sitting in the grass in the end zone at one end of the field. And this coach, with other coaches lined up behind him, yelled out to those boys, "What is our job?" Meaning the coaches. And the boys yelled back in unison, "To love us." What is your job? To love each other. I begin with that today because it speaks directly to the core of the topic that I want to share with you this evening. And that is redefining what it means to be a successful coach. What does it mean to be a successful coach? I want to take a look at those two words one at a time. As a writer, I love looking at words and seeing what they really mean. First, that word success. If you go back to 1806, the first year that Webster's dictionary was published, and wanted to know what it meant to be a successful man or woman in this world, it was defined for you by four words, only four. And they were prosperous, fortunate, happy, and kind. Think about those last two for just a moment, happy and kind. Promise you, if you look in a dictionary tonight, you will no longer find those as part of the definition. Hang that original definition, if you will, on an imaginary banner over everything else I'm going to share with you this evening. And then right under it, put the word coach, our definition of coach. I'm not actually giving you a new definition, I'm giving you the oldest definition of all. 1500s in England, the first usage of the word coach in the English language. Back then, a coach was known as a horse-drawn carriage. But it wasn't just any old carriage, it had a specific purpose. The purpose was to convey or transport a person of importance from where he or she is to where he or she wants to be, needs to be, or ought to be going. I would make the argument this evening that all these years later, that's exactly what we ought to be expecting of, and in fact, demanding of our youth coaches in America. Understand that that has nothing to do with points on a scoreboard, league championships, MVPs, or any of that other stuff. Why is that so important to us? It's a matter of sheer numbers. Let's look at a few numbers. 20 to 30 million children, boys and girls, playing youth sports in America today. Add to that about another 10 million who are playing interscholastic sports as teenagers. About 5 million adults coaching our young people in America today. What a great opportunity to reach and to teach. I think sports is the most powerful platform in America today. When used properly, it's incredible what can be done with those numbers and that platform. With that in mind, I want to share a personal story with you. It's a story that I've been experiencing for many, many years now. It's a story about a man named Joe Herman. Joe Herman was the coach in that initial scene that I shared with you this evening. I've known Joe for a long time. Many years ago, back in the 1970s, Joe Herman was a big-time football star, a defensive lineman, an All-American at Syracuse University, and then an All-Pro in the NFL, playing for the Baltimore Colts when there was such a team. Joe was not only a leader on the field, but also off the field. He was a big-time 1970s party guy. If you wanted to know where the team party was or the poker game, go check with Joe. Joe was always reaching out to pull other people in. And I was incredibly fortunate as a young boy because at the age of 11, I became a ball boy for the Baltimore Colts at the same time that Joe was playing for that team. And as the years went on, I lived with, worked with, and traveled with this NFL football team. The impact that that had on my childhood and therefore my entire life is absolutely incredible. Joe reached out and he pulled me in. We stayed in touch for years, but then as happens in life, we just kind of went our own ways and things move on. It wasn't until 2001, 18 years had passed since I had picked up a phone and called Joe. But in 2001, I had reason to do so for a project I was working on in Baltimore. And it was great to reconnect with Joe. Joe was doing very different things now in 2001. He wasn't knocking down quarterbacks anymore. Now Joe was a minister, pastor of a very large church in Baltimore, about 4,000 members. He had been responsible for starting an inner city ministry called The Door. He was one of the leaders in getting the first Ronald McDonald House in Baltimore, serving sick children and their families when they come for long-term treatments in Baltimore. He had started a program called Mission Baltimore that was all about racial reconciliation in a city that desperately needed help and hope in that area. And oh, by the way, Joe said at the end of our first phone call in 18 years, we're about an hour on the phone, and he says, I'm also coaching a little high school football on the side. I was really surprised by that. Why? It seemed like he was so far removed from all of that. Joe explained to me he was only doing this because it was the perfect context in which to implement his program he had started called Building Men for Others. Building Men for Others is all about teaching boys and men how to be men of substance and impact in this world as opposed to all the other junk that we're being fed out there these days. He explained to me that there's something called false masculinity in our culture, and that's all about athletic ability, sexual conquest, and economic success. He explained to me why those are absolute lies and they have nothing to do with being a man. And then he explained how he replaces that with his own definition. He calls it strategic masculinity, and that's what he teaches boys, high school boys, teenagers in the city of Baltimore. That's all about relationships, and it's all about having a cause beyond yourself. So that if I were to walk out of here today and be hit by a truck and be on my deathbed tonight in a hospital in Chicago, I would look back over my life and evaluate it based on questions such as, what kind of husband was I? What kind of father? What kind of son? What kind of brother? What kind of teammate, classmate, citizen in my community? All of those being relationship-based questions. And then I would want to know about my cause. Did I somehow do something in some way to impact others to leave this place a little better than it was before I got here? Well, I got off the phone and I was absolutely blown away. And I kept asking myself this question. I knew I had learned so much about Joe when I was a boy. What might I learn from him now as an adult? So I was intrigued, and I went up that summer in August to see Joe as this coach in action in Baltimore. And that's when I started seeing this, what is our job? What is your job? That's touchy-feely stuff for football, the most violent sport in America. Understand, Joe and his best friend Biff, they coach together. Those guys know football, and they coach football, trust me. 8 of 9 years champions at Gilman School, champions in the toughest conference in Baltimore, 4 of those years undefeated and ranked number 1 in the entire state of Maryland. Those guys, once they blow the whistle, trust me, they will light you up. They will also reach out a hand and help you up. See, what these guys are all about, they believe that football or any other sport is not an extracurricular activity, that's a co-curricular activity. It's just like math, science, history, or anything else. The teacher should come in with a plan, a lesson plan, and core concepts that have nothing to do with short-term outcomes, but that are all about long-term benefits and impact. So what do these guys have in their playbook for high school football? Their core concepts are kindness, empathy, integrity, justice, inclusion, living a life of service to others, bringing all your talents both on and off the field. It's all about keeping the head and the heart connected. In the human body, on average, those two are about 17 inches apart. But we as boys and men are taught at a very young age to yank them as far apart as we can get them, sever that connection, and never let them see each other again. Why? Because if we're going to be men according to this old definition of masculinity, we need to lead with the head, not the heart. We need to be rational, never let that emotional stuff come into play. See, they don't believe in that. It's different there. This is a unique philosophy, and it leads to some incredible moments. The most incredible to me happens at the end of the season. Last game of the year, every year, they play their arch rival, McDonough. Home and away, they alternate years. 4 hours before kickoff, I don't know what the McDonough guys are doing in their locker room, but the scene for those Gilman boys and their coaches is absolutely remarkable. Because each senior on that football team has been given an assignment at the beginning of the week. He has to write an essay, the title of which is How I Want to Be Remembered When I Die. I will tell you that if every school in America did that same program, I don't mean just the football team, I don't mean just write an essay, I mean every high school across the board, whether it's football team, the band, the math club, or anything else, do an 8 to 10 to 12-week program, end it with this essay exercise, I submit to you that 5, 10, 20 years from now, we would literally be living in a different world. Now, there were two totally unexpected twists for me to this story. The first one was I was tricked. I thought I was just going up there for one day to see what these guys did. I ended up spending a whole season with them, and I wrote a book called Season of Life about that experience, about that whole journey. Well, that Season of Life journey now has been going on for 8 years. And I've seen it touching lives all over America, and it means more to me than anything else I've ever been involved in as a writer. And then there was the second unexpected twist. See, I thought I was there just as an observer. Even once I decided to write about it, I thought I was just going to observe. I became a participant because you can't help but be around those men, those coaches, and those boys without getting drawn into everything that they're about. So I went through this self-evaluation. I wanted to check on my cause piece. I have a cause piece. That one was easy to check off. It all goes back to my sister Wendy, my only sister, my little sister, my best friend in this world. Wendy was very sick in 1989, and her life was saved at the last minute, at the last hour, by a liver transplant. Wendy and Carl Lewis, the Olympic champion, a good friend of ours, the three of us decided to form a foundation in Wendy's name. We worked on it traveling this country for years, doing everything we could to help increase public awareness of the need for organ donations. Check it off. Then I went to that relationships piece, and I looked at them all. And I thought, and I looked at family relationships, friendships, spiritual relationship. No matter what I kept thinking about, I would always end up coming back to my dad. Now, my dad was an awesome father when I was a child. I knew my dad loved me, but it certainly wasn't from him telling me that. It was from his actions. The first time my dad told me he loved me, I was 24 years old. I remember it very well. It meant a lot to me, but unfortunately, it was more of a milestone than it was a stepping stone. Nothing else came of it. My dad is what I would call a stoic. His emotional thermometer stuck right in the middle. No highs, no lows. Just keep your head down, keep on moving, do what you do as a man. Go with the rational, not the emotional. Maybe that's why he was a math teacher. But in 2001, I knew I needed something more. There was so much my dad and I could always talk about, but there was always so much that we couldn't talk about, things that mattered deeply to me in my life. And so at the end of that football season in 2001, I decided to drive up from Washington, D.C., where I lived at the time, to New York, where my dad lived, and I wanted to spend that weekend with him. He knew I was coming, but he didn't know what was coming. And for 3 days, we spent hours, just the two of us, sitting alone on the couch in his living room, starting a dialogue that has been going and growing ever since. It's been amazing to see it change his life, our relationship, and so many relationships that involve him and they involve me. Unfortunately, to show you the true impact of this, the one example that I think just pounds it home for me every single day, I have to share with you the single worst thing that's ever happened in my life. It was in 2003. My sister Wendy became very sick again. This uninvited poison in her body, hepatitis B virus, which had necessitated the transplant in the first place in 1989, came back again with a vengeance. She had had a lot of ups and downs over the years, but this was the worst. And in 2003, for the first time, we learned what it meant to have a shortage of organ donors in this nation. I always thought I knew what it meant. Wendy always thought she knew. Carl always thought he understood that. But unfortunately for us, it all came home in a very unwelcome way in 2003. At that point, 19 people a day in our nation were dying, needing a heart, liver, lung, kidney, pancreas, whatever the case might be, only because those organs were not available. The technology was there to save their lives. The donations were not. On October 28, 2003, I held my little sister and best friend as she took her final breath in this world. Wendy was 36 years old at the time. Now, I don't bring that up to bring you down. I bring that up because I want to tell you about the two threads that I'm able to pull on and hold on to every single day since then as I try to move forward in my life with, as I say, Wendy still with me on my shoulder. The first thread is looking back on Wendy's life and knowing that in her 36 years, she was a woman built for others, a human being built for others, unlike anyone I've ever known in my life. Her relationships were so deep and so rich. Her cause was so impactful. As her brother, I'm incredibly proud that my sister was such an amazing woman built for others. And then there's that second thread. It relates to my dad. My dad in 2003 was present in that hospital room with us during those final weeks and days, present both physically and emotionally in ways that I know he never would have been capable of prior to our whole season of life journey, as I call it. Ultimately, what I learned from Joe Herman is that we never, ever stop learning, even as adults, because we never run out of opportunities to enhance the relationships that mean the most to us. We never run out of chances to impact the lives of others, and we never, ever run out of opportunities to love and to be loved. Successful coaching, that's what I call successful coaching. Those three words, success, coach, that we redefined right at the top, and then greatness, Joe's definition of greatness. We expect greatness out of you. And the way we define greatness is the way you impact other people's lives. That's the only way. So those three, success, coach, greatness, you leave those with those here on your banner this evening that I talked about, waving this imaginary banner. Put them on there. Take that banner with you, whether you're a coach, a teacher, a parent, a mentor, a friend, a sibling, whatever the case might be, wherever it is your role to make a difference in this world. And it doesn't matter if you're having a good day, a bad day, or anything in between. I truly believe that if you wave that banner in every circumstance as a definition of who you are and of what you're going to do in this world, the question will never be, can you change the world around you? The only question will be, will you choose to do so? Choice. Will you choose to do so? Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.